surprisingly friendly man, with a large black moustache and a quick smile. His business was to purchase the furniture of incoming passengers, which he then sold to those folk who were going home. "You will leave the goods here," he told Sharpe, "and on the day of your embarkation, my cousin will deliver them to your ship." "Which ship is that?" "The Calliope," Sharpe said. "Ah, the Calliope. Captain Cromwell. Alas, the Calliope is anchored in the roads, so the goods will need to be carried out by boat. But my cousin charges very little for such a service, Mr. Sharpe, very little. And when you are happily arrived in London, you can sell the items for much profit." Which might, or more probably might not, have been true, but was irrelevant because that same night, just 2 days before Sharpe was to embark, Nana Rao's go-down was burnt to the ground, and all the goods, the beds, bookcases, lanterns, water filters, blankets, boxes, tables and chairs, the arrack, soap, tobacco, brandy and wine, were supposedly consumed with the warehouse. In the morning there was nothing but ashes, smoke, and a group of shrieking mourners who wailed that the kindly Nana Rao had died in the conflagration. Happily, another go-down, not 300 yards from Nana Rao's ruined business, was well supplied with all the necessities for the voyage, and that second warehouse did a fine trade as disgruntled passengers replaced their vanished goods at prices that were almost double those that Nana Rao had charged. Richard Sharpe did not buy anything from the second warehouse. He had been in Bombay for 5 months, much of that time spent sweating and shivering in the castle hospital. But when the fever had passed, and while he was waiting for the annual convoy to arrive from Britain with the ship that would carry him home, he had explored the city, from the wealthy houses in the Malabar Hills to the pestilential alleys by the waterfront. He had found companionship in the alleyways, and it was one of those acquaintances who, in return for a golden guinea, gave Sharpe a scrap of information which the ensign reckoned was worth far more than a guinea. It was indeed worth 115 rupees, which was why, at nightfall, Sharpe was in another alley on the eastern outskirts of the city. He wore his uniform, though over it he had donned a swathing cloak made of cheap sacking which was thickly impregnated with mud and filth. He limped and shuffled, his body bent over with a hand outstretched as though he were begging. He muttered to himself and twitched, and sometimes turned and snarled at some innocent soul for no apparent reason. He went utterly unnoticed. He found the house he wanted and squatted by its wall. A score of beggars, some horribly maimed, were gathered by the gate, along with almost 100 petitioners who waited for the house's owner, a wealthy merchant, to return from his place of business. The merchant came after nightfall, riding in a curtained palanquin that was carried by 8 men, while another dozen men whacked the beggars out of the way with long staves. But once the merchant's palanquin was safe inside the courtyard, the gates were left open so that the petitioners and beggars could follow. The beggars, Sharpe among them, were pushed to one side of the yard, while the petitioners gathered at the foot of the broad steps that climbed to the house door. Lanterns hung from the coconut palms that arched over the yard, while from inside the big house yellow candlelight glimmered behind filigree shutters. Sharpe pushed as close to the house as he could, staying in the shadow of the palm trunks. Under the greasy cloak he had his cavalry sabre and a loaded pistol, though he hoped he would need neither weapon. The merchant was called Panjit, and he kept the petitioners and beggars waiting until he had eaten his evening meal. But then the house door was thrown open,